There is a giant, Goliath, and he stands across a field from the army of Israel. He's tall. He's even taller than Israel's leader, Saul, who is famously tall. And Goliath has the best weapons and the best armor and the best words. As my daughter Ivy said, Goliath is infinity and 100. Goliath says, "Am I not just a Philistine? Are you not just servants of Saul? I defy the ranks of Israel. Send a man to fight me, and whoever wins, that will decide it. The loser's side will serve the winner's side, and only one man must die." Goliath is lying. This goes on for 40 days, and no one will fight him. Now, much earlier, when the people of Israel had demanded that God give them a king, the prophet Samuel told them, "You don't want one. A king will tax you, force your sons and daughters into his service, take your land, and so on." The people of Israel said, "Thank you for that, but all the same, we'd like a king." So they got Saul, who impressed them on account of he was taller than they were. But even Saul looks across the battlefield now at Goliath, and he won't fight. Presently, a boy comes to the battlefront, sent to bring food to his older brothers and 10 cheese slices to the captain. Some translations say 10 cheese wedges. David hears Goliath's taunting, and he hears that Saul will give prizes to whoever defeats the giant. David is interested. Saul hears that David is interested, and he sends for him. David says, "I will fight the giant." Saul says, "But you are only a youth, and Goliath has been a warrior since he was a youth." David says, "I can basically kill a lion with my bare hands." Even a bear. "And I'll do the same thing to this giant." Saul says, "Well, go, and may the Lord be with you, but wear my armor all the same." David stumbles around in Saul's armor, but then hands it back, for he is not used to it. Instead, David gathers 5 smooth stones from the brook, and with his sling in his hand, walks over to the giant. Goliath sees this and does not like it. Not one bit. Goliath says, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And he curses David in the name of his gods and goes on about how he's going to kill him. And then David channels someone who won't live for another 1,000 years. Someone else whose name was, at first, Saul, who wrote that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. David says, "You come to me with your sword, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." And he sprinkles in some other words about how he'll win. And he does, with the first stone in his sling.
Picking up the story in 1 Samuel, chapter 17, beginning with verse 38. Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag, in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, with his shield-bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." When the Philistine drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, striking down the Philistine and killing him. There was no sword in David's hand. The word of the Lord. In the chapter before this, chapter 17, Samuel is distraught. Saul, the king, has not lived up to expectations, and it's time to move on. God says to Samuel, "Samuel, it's time that you moved on and anointed a new king. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Bethlehem, and I want you to go to Jesse's house in Bethlehem, and I want you to anoint one of his sons to be the new king." So Samuel goes to Bethlehem, goes to Jesse's house, and says to Jesse, "I am here. I want to see your sons." Okay. So the sons come out one by one. Eliab comes out, and Samuel says, "Oh, yes, indeed. This is the king for sure. Tall and strong and mighty. Yes, I can imagine this king out in front of the army leading in battle." But God said to Samuel, "This is not the one. Humans look on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart." Okay, all right, here comes the next one. Abinadab. And no, not Abinadab. Well, Abinadab looks like he'd be a fine king. Not Abinadab. Shammah. No. Oh, yes, finally, yes, okay, sure. No, not Shammah. One after the other, after the other, after the other of Jesse's sons comes. No, not this one. No, not this one. No, not this one. Samuel says, "Well, do you have anyone else?" "Well, there's the shepherd, but he's out tending flocks, and he's not of any consequence." Samuel says, "Well, bring him here anyway." Okay. the shepherd boy comes, and God said, "This is the one." David does not possess, in his battle with Goliath, any of the sort of classical attributes that we associate with heroism. He's a boy. And the skills that he has are the skills of a child. He's good with a slingshot. He's been practicing. And he's going up against this great, big, giant Goliath. The one thing that David has that no one else has in this sort of comical exchange is not that he's good with a slingshot, although he is, not that he's particularly mighty, not even that he's courageous. He's not courageous at all. He believes that God will grant the victory. He's not afraid. There's no overcoming fear here. He has trust and he has faith that God is God and that God is going to do what God is going to do. That is all that he has. That is all that makes him unique. Otherwise, truly, he is of no consequence. We've heard this story, some version of it, before a number of times. Right? This isn't the only story like this. Gideon is one of my favorites. I love Gideon. I love the story of Gideon. He collects an army of 300 people whose most unique and qualifying characteristics is that they drink water like dogs. That's funny. The Bible's funny and it's supposed to be funny. Right? That is their defining characteristic that qualifies them to be a part of this army is that they drink water like dogs. Read it. Judges chapter 6, if you don't believe me. Their weapons are trumpets and jars with lamps on them, and their strategy is to blow the trumpets and break the jars. But they have one defining quality that makes a difference: faith. Otherwise, they are of no consequence. They're just a bunch of men who lap water like dogs. Another great one, Moses. He's told that he needs to lift his arms in the air, and as long as he lifts his arms in the air, the Israelites will win. That is the defining qualification that Israel needs to win the battle. Moses has the capability of raising his arms in the air. So that's I can do that still. But Moses gets tired. His arms get tired. I mean, I don't know how long I could do this. Anybody try this? How long could you raise your arms in the air? And his arms began to get tired. And so they sat him down on a stone and had two men on either side of them lifting up his arms for him. The defining quality of Moses and of the people of Israel was not a great big army, not the finest weapons, not the strongest men, but faith. And we see this in the New Testament. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Without Christ who strengthens me, I can do nothing. You see, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Faith, our source of strength, is not our own might and not our own power, not our own minds, our brilliance, but it's Christ who strengthens us. If you look at what Jesus asks of his followers, it's not that they achieve any sort of greatness, that they're particularly competent or brilliant, particularly strong or heroic. we are asked to take up our cross and follow him. And through much of the early parts of church history, they took that quite literally. The greatest aspiration of the early Christians, what they wanted to achieve more than anything, was to die, to be executed, to be publicly shamed as a common criminal. That's what they wanted in life. That was their desire. They didn't want to be great or mighty. They wanted to be like Jesus. The Bible's a strange book, is it not? In our world, we live in what we call a meritocracy. Anybody heard the word meritocracy? We believe that if you work hard enough, are smart enough, are strong enough, are savvy enough, that you can achieve anything. You can become anything. We are achievement-oriented. And we are very concerned to make sure that our children have the best opportunity so that they can achieve. Go to the best schools, the best activities that are going to help them be successful in life. We are an achievement-oriented society, and we are an achievement-oriented people at College Mennonite Church. Achievement's important to us, is it not? We are achievement-oriented. Now, there are certain things that we value. We probably wouldn't value at College Mennonite Church somebody who was a great soldier or warrior, or maybe even somebody who was a politician we might not value so much. But somebody who goes on to a great academic career, who invents some incredible thing, somebody who wins a Pulitzer Prize, we would think that person was really, really important. They'd achieved a lot. And we forget David. We forget what truly makes us great. What truly makes us consequential are not the things that we think make us consequential. The things that make us consequential, that give us our sense of worth, are our faithfulness. God values us not for who we think that we are or who we think that we ought to be, but for who we truly are. And God asks us to be faithful and to trust. And that is the measure of achievement. That's what makes David great. As I was thinking about this text, I thought about the boy in John's Gospel who has the loaves and fish. Remember? In John's Gospel, the story is told this way. Jesus says, "Well, what do you have?" "Well, we got this boy here, and he's got a few loaves and fish." "Oh, that's enough." You think about that boy. "Hey, Jesus wants your dinner, son." It's kind of my dinner. My mom packed it for me. I want to eat it. He does exactly the same thing that David does. He trusts. He has faith. He gives of the gifts that God has given to him, however meager they might seem to be. A psalm that I've had going through my head these days is Psalm 19. Psalm 19. I think I'm going to read it just because it's so remarkable. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, and yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. You hear what the psalmist is saying, right? The stars don't talk, but yet they proclaim God's glory. Their consequence and significance is not in their ability to articulate anything, but yet they do. Isn't that glorious? Isn't that wonderful? For our response, I want us to sing, "Nothing is lost in the breath of God," which I think in some ways is about David. Nothing is lost in the breath of God. God values everything. Everything is of consequence. No feather too light, no hair too fine, no flower too brief, no drop in the ocean, whether it contains a water bear or not, no dust in the air, but is counted and told in God's story. Everything matters in God's story. The gifts of a child matter in God's story. No journey too far, nor no distance too great, no valley of darkness too blinding, no creature too humble, no child too small for God to be seeking and finding. Each one of us is of consequence in ways we don't even understand. No office, no impulse of love, no office of care, no moment of life in its fullness, no beginning too late, no ending too soon, but is gathered and known in its goodness. Amen.